We begin in Japan. Foreign ministers from the group of 7 nations are meeting in Japan today. The leaders have assembled at the resort town of Karuizawa to discuss a host of global issues, which also includes a united approach to China. On the agenda of the crucial meeting are 3 key issues: the war in Ukraine, China's aggression towards Taiwan, and the tension in the Korean Peninsula. At the meeting are ministers from the United States, Japan, Germany, Britain, France, Canada, Italy, and a representative from the European Union. The discussions will set the stage for a leaders' summit in Hiroshima next month. The leaders arrived at the resort town by a bullet train from Tokyo. They attended a working dinner on Sunday night. Host Japan is also ensuring that regional challenges are on the top of the agenda. China is front and center of discussions. Just days ago, Beijing concluded major military drills around Taiwan, which it considers as part of its own territory. The focus will also be to persuade North Korea back to nuclear disarmament talks. Japan, along with South Korea, have been confronted with a series of missile launches from Pyongyang. This includes the launch of its new solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile. Apart from this, Tokyo will also emphasize that it believes that Russia's invasion of Ukraine heightens the need for vigilance in Asia. Japan has repeatedly reiterated this stance, saying that security of Europe and that of the Indo-Pacific are intertwined. On the final day, the foreign ministers will discuss nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. Japan hopes to demonstrate the group's unity in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It also aims to formulate programs that increase connectivity with the global south.
In addition, as emerging and developing countries called the Global South are facing various challenges, we would like to show that the G7 is ready to work with them to tackle those issues. So from this standpoint, I would like to have a frank and in-depth exchange of views on various topics, like we did last night, over the course of 3 days, really in the meeting result. Those topics include Ukraine, the Indo-Pacific, including China and North Korea, Iran and Middle East, Afghanistan and Central Asia and Africa.
Apart from this, environment ministers of the 7 participating nations held separate talks on Sunday. Some big and new collective targets for solar power and offshore wind capacity have been set. They also agreed to speed up renewable energy development as well as move towards a quicker phase out of fossil fuels. Watch this next report.
G7 ministers have set big new targets for solar power and offshore wind. Climate and energy ministers agreed on Sunday to speed up both developing clean energy and phasing out fossil fuels after 2 days of talks in the Japanese city of Sapporo. Renewable fuel sources and energy security have taken on a new urgency following the Ukraine war. But the climate and energy ministers stopped short of agreeing a 2030 deadline to phase out coal, which Canada and other members had pushed for. And they left the door open for continuing to invest in gas, saying it could help ease energy shortfalls. Japan's Trade and Industry Minister, Yasutoshi Nishimura.
In the G7 meeting, we acknowledged that different countries around the world have various economic and energy situations, and the path to carbon neutrality by 2050 should be diverse. The important thing is to aim towards net zero, our common goal, and that was recognised.
The G7 communiqué pledged to collectively increase offshore wind capacity by 150 gigawatts by 2030 and solar capacity to more than 1 terawatt, which they called a drastic rise in clean power. They agreed to accelerate phasing out unabated fossil fuels. That is, the burning of fossil fuels without using technology to capture the resulting CO2 emissions. That would achieve net zero in energy systems by 2050 at the latest, the ministers said, promising concrete and timely steps towards scrapping coal. Canada said unabated coal-fired power should be phased out by 2030, and Ottawa, Britain and some other G7 members committed to that date. Canada's Minister of Natural Resources, Jonathan Wilkinson, told Reuters. Additional plastic pollution should be cut to zero by 2040, they said, bringing the target forward by a decade.
And for more on this, joining us live now from Tokyo is Chris Gilbert. He's our correspondent. Chris, good to see you. 3 issues dominating the agenda: China's aggression towards Taiwan, war in Ukraine, and tensions in the Korean Peninsula. What kind of negotiations and agreements are expected on these issues by the foreign ministers?
Well, I mean, you said it in your intro a minute or two ago, as absolutely critical. This meeting is going to be the on-ramp to the G7 summit, which is happening here in Japan next month. The foreign ministers are charged with polishing and refining the foreign, I guess not foreign policy, but foreign objectives, security objectives around the globe for their bosses, the Joe Bidens, the Rishi Sunaks, the Justin Trudeaus and company. They are charged over today and tomorrow is what they have left to really reach consensus on a number of critical issues. As you mentioned, Chinese military assertiveness around the Taiwan Strait being one of them. They already came out last night with a unified voice being, look, we again oppose any change to the status quo by unilateral acts of force. Today they're going to be discussing the war in Ukraine, and tomorrow more on nuclear non-proliferation and denuclearization. Obviously, North Korea is going to come into the talks today and tomorrow as well. But in terms of hard outcomes and deliverables, we may not see so many hard announcements like sanctions and such coming out of this meeting. This meeting is maybe, those decisions may be made, but that will be saved for the G7 summit, for their bosses, the presidents and prime ministers here in Japan next month.
Chris, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has assured maximum security to the officials and also delegates who will be attending the summit. Take us through some of the security arrangements that have been implemented so far in Japan.
Well, look, first of all, security is a concern in Japan at the moment for obvious reasons. We just had a security issue at the Prime Minister's rally on Saturday when a member of the public threw what appeared to be a homemade pipe bomb at the Prime Minister, and nobody was hurt, thank goodness, but it could have been disastrous. Last year, obviously, very similar circumstances when former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was shot and killed at a very similar open-air rally. There are security concerns around political events in Japan. But starting with, the G7 and the ministers meeting, they are pretty much a fortress. They're in hotels and they're blocked off for streets and streets and streets around the hotel. Entire blocks are cordoned off. It's fairly impenetrable, these meetings and summits. The media can't even get in. They're in a media center miles away, nearby, but a fair distance. The police presence, not so much here in Tokyo, but where the meeting is at the moment in Karuizawa, has been extremely intensified on the streets, on the trains, at toll booths along the highways. The security at these events is completely different from the security situation at local campaign rallies. However, it does still raise concerns about people like the assailant Ryuji Kimura on Saturday, that they are still trying to make homemade explosives. His home was raided yesterday morning, and homemade gunpowder may have been found. He had a knife on him at the time of the attack as well. Questions remain about what more can be done at these open air rallies that are held for elections here in Japan to keep the politicians safe and the public safe, but also the public engaged. Japan has very low public engagement in elections, in politics, and fair heightening events like these attacks, I think, will only make that worse. So some serious questions still to consider.
All right, live from Tokyo, Japan, our correspondent Chris Gilbert. Chris, thank you very much. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.